Hi everybody and welcome back to Ben Piper Drums. If you're new here, join the growing community and hit that subscribe button. Today we're going to take a look at some basic drum notation. This will be a really helpful video for you if you're new to drum lessons, and I recommend that you watch this video before you start any of the beginner lessons. Or if you're a parent trying to help your child practice at home and just struggling with the written music, so this should really clear up some confusion for you guys. Now, lots of people can get put off by the idea of learning something which is essentially like a new language at first, and it's safe to say that there's plenty of successful rock stars out there who don't know how to read music and have got no interest in learning, and that's fine. But for the sake of supplying drum lessons and for moving through the grade system, it's essential that you have some understanding of drum notation. The good news is that reading drum music is really easy. We don't need to think about melody. All we need to know is which part of the drum kit to hit and when to hit it. So first of all, let's talk a little bit about left and right-handers. Now this kit is a right-handed setup where I cross my hands and lead on the hi-hat with my right hand. Now, left-handed players sometimes would learn perfectly well on a right-handed drum kit, but most would prefer to set the drum kit up as a complete mirror image so that they can then lead with the hi-hat with their left hand on this side. Others play what's known as open-handed, where the kit is set up as a right-handed setup like this, but they lead with their left hand on the hi-hat. Now, if you're left-handed, it's worth doing some research into this and just finding out exactly what's most comfortable for you personally. Now, this kit is also a pretty standard setup with regards to components. You've all seen drummers online with loads of different toms and cymbals, and you can add as many things as you want to your drum kit, but this is a great starting point with your 3 toms and your 2 cymbals. Let's take a look at the different drum voices on the page and on the kit itself. Written music is a collection of notes and rests arranged on a set of 5 lines, which is also known as a stave. Now, each space on the stave represents a different part of the drum kit. There can be slight variations in how drum music is written depending on which books you're using, but for the sake of this video, we're going to be looking at the notation as it appears in the Trinity grade material. Now, to get started with some basic beginner patterns on the drum kit, you only need 3 different drum voices. The bass drum, which is always printed at the bottom of the stave, which makes sense because the bass pedal is at the bottom of the drum kit, so that's easy to remember. So the next part is the snare drum. Now, the snare drum is printed in the second space down on the stave, so whenever we see a note printed in that section, we know to hit the snare drum. And finally, the hi-hat, which is written as a cross on the very top line of the stave. Now, a hi-hat can be used in different ways, open or closed. And a hi-hat on a real drum kit is 2 small cymbals that sit on top of each other. And the pedal on the left-hand side of the drum kit is the hi-hat control. You lift your foot up to raise the top hi-hat and you put pressure on the pedal again to keep it closed. Now, the open hi-hat is written in the book as the cross on the top line, but with a little circle above it. And when you need to close it again, there will be a plus sign above the cross. Now, to start off with, we'll always be using a hi-hat closed, so we want to be applying pressure to that left pedal to keep that hi-hat closed. Now, sometimes I find with younger ones, when they're struggling to pick up their first few beats, it's sometimes helpful to just lock the hi-hat closed so that they don't need to apply that pressure, and then they can just concentrate on what they're doing with their other limbs. So, as I've said, we only need 3 drum voices for our first few beginner patterns. So that is the hi-hat, the snare drum, and the bass drum. But we also have cymbals and toms on the drum kit as well. The symbol on the left is the crash cymbal. Now this is written as a circle with a cross inside that sits above the top line. And on the right hand side we have the ride cymbal, which is written as a cross, but instead of sitting on the top line like the hi-hat does, it has the top line going through the middle of the note. Next up we have the toms. Now these run clockwise in pitch from high to low. Now, directly above the snare drum is the high tom, or top tom as it's also known. Now, this is written in the top space of the stave, so nice and easy to remember. If the note's at the very top of the stave, it's the top tom. Now, to the right of the top tom is the middle tom. Now, this is a note written with the second line of the stave going through the middle of the note. So again, nice and easy to remember. The note with the line going through the middle of it is the middle tom. And finally, we have the low tom, also known as the floor tom because it's sometimes a separate unit that stands on the floor, whereas the top tom and middle toms are sometimes referred to as rack toms because they attach to the top of the bass drum. Now the floor tom or low tom is written in the space just above where the bass drum is. So let's quickly run through those again. We have the snare drum, the bass drum, the toms, so top tom, middle tom, and floor tom, the hi-hat, play closed or open, the crash cymbal, and the ride cymbal. So there we go. Now that we're familiar with how all the different drum voices appear on a page, let's talk a little bit about how we count music. All of our beginner patterns and songs will be in what's known as a 4/4 time signature, or common time. A time signature always appears at the start of a piece of music, and it tells us how to count each bar. So the top number is telling us how many, and the bottom number is telling us of which note. So a 4/4 time signature is telling us that there are 4 quarter notes to every bar. Now, there are lots of different ways of counting different types of music, but this is the only way we'll be doing it for now. Let's take a look at 3 different note values. So the quarter note, which is also known as a crotchet, eighth notes, which are also known as quavers, and 16th notes, which are also known as semiquavers. Now, quarter notes are the notes that sit on their own. They never join up to another note, they always look the same. There are 4 quarter notes in a 4/4 bar, so in effect dividing the bar into 4 quarters. So when we have a metronome running, set here for 65 beats per minute, we can count the 4 clicks as the 4 quarter notes in the bar. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Now that is a full bar. We can also think of this as the pulse of the music, or the beat that we might tap our foot to when we're listening to music. Next we have eighth notes. Now there are 8 of these in a bar, and they are written as being joined up with a line. Now instead of counting up to 8, what we're going to do is keep the quarter notes as the numbers, which you already have, and we're going to put an and in between those. So then with a click running, we count that as 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. And finally, we have the 16th notes, which are joined up with 2 lines. Now again, instead of counting to 16 throughout the bar, we're now going to put an E and an around the numbers and the ands that we already have in the bar. So with the click, we can count that as 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 3 E and a, 4 E and a. The numbers that we're counting are still the quarter notes, but we're fitting the 8th notes and the 16th notes around those quarter notes. So in other words, there is 1 quarter note per pulse, 2 8th notes per pulse, and 4 16th notes per pulse. Now I can demonstrate this by playing 1 bar of each note value on the snare drum along with the click, like this. What you will notice is that the pulse stays the same throughout those 3 bars. So they're all the same speed, but what we're doing is we're fitting more notes into the space with each bar. Now we're not going to spend too long on the theory of note values because it's something that will become clearer as we move through different exercises. But lastly, let's take a look at the first beginner pattern, and we'll have a look at some of the note values and the drum voices that we've already been learning about. Now, we can cheat a little bit here, and we don't even really need to understand note values at all. As you can see, the crosses on the top line are the hi-hats, and they are written as 8th notes. So we're going to count those as 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Now, if we want, we can just use that as a map to tell us where the bass drum and snare drum falls. For example, the bass drum appears on beats 1 and 3, and the snare drum appears on beats 2 and 4. Click on to the next video where we will work out how to play this most basic but really important rock beat. Once you've learned how to play this well, you can call yourself a drummer. So hopefully that has cleared up a few questions about reading drum music. If there's anything else you'd like to know, or you've got any questions, then please feel free to email me or message me in the comments section. And remember, if you haven't already done so, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any new videos. Thanks guys, and happy drumming.